Welcome, everybody, to the May 2024 edition of Streets for All Happy Hour. So happy to have you here. We're very excited to have Jesse Zwick, who is a council member with the city of Santa Monica, with us as our featured guest today. Before we get to our conversation with Jesse, we're going to give you an update on our efforts in Sacramento, talk about Measure HLA and how the mayor's proposed budget relates to it, go over a few wins and fails of the month, and get to our conversation with Jesse. Our icebreaker this time, appropriate for our guest, is what transportation project do you most want to see happen in Santa Monica? I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten, who's going to give us an update on our state efforts and answer our icebreaker. Kirsten.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Blvd. I'm Associate Director of State Policy for Streets for All. And, I unfortunately live pretty far away from Santa Monica, but when I have been there, I thought it would be nice to see more e-bike stations, e-bike share stations. Yeah. Next slide. So right now in the legislative session, we are at the first House Fiscal Committee, also known as Appropriations. So this is where bills go, well, in a tough budget year like this year, this is often where bills go to die, but we're holding strong so far. Next slide. So AB 3177, this is our bill that will end road widening mandates for new housing developments. Particularly in Los Angeles, we see the city make it a condition of approval for new housing that the developer has to widen the road. And we've gotten great support for this bill. It is in appropriations right now. SB 960 is our bill that would require Caltrans to implement complete streets elements for their paving projects, also in appropriations right now. And then SB 961, this was our bill to require speed governors as well as underguards on new trucks. And unfortunately it got amended down to remove the side underguards on trucks. There was a ton of opposition from the trucking industry. So unfortunately that's no longer in the bill. And the speed governors are now more of a speed warning system, which is what you see in the European Union. Basically, if you are driving more than 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, the car will beep at you. And so that's also in appropriations. AB 2503, which is our bill to exempt electric rail projects from CEQA. This is out of appropriations and even passed its first floor vote. So this is our bill that's the farthest along. AB 2583 is our school zone bill. And this graphic is a little outdated. This in committee was changed to lower the school zone speed limit to 20 miles per hour. And it also switches to a time-based standard instead of the when children are present standard. And that is in appropriations right now. AB 2744, this is our only bill that isn't moving forward, and it was killed in Transportation Committee. Next slide. SB 1100, this would end the practice of requiring a driver's license for jobs that don't actually require driving, and also end the practice of landlords asking for a driver's license in order to apply for housing. SB 1216, this is our other bill that is out of appropriations. It bans the use of sharrows on roads that are have a posted speed limit of greater than 30 miles per hour. And then SB 1271, also in appropriations, this would create safe e-bike manufacturing standards. Most notably, it would require all e-bikes sold in California to have a UL certified battery. Okay, and I'll kick it off to Michael for a Measure HLA update.
Thanks, Kirsten. I think the project I would love to see in Santa Monica, it's a big one, but it would be extending the purple line that's about to be extended to the VA further west to the ocean and to connect it with the Expo line. I'd love to have a northern east-west transit corridor and a southern one. All right, so what's going on with Measure HLA? Well, not much, at least publicly. There's a lot of behind the scenes activity in the city. There's still no organized plan from the city. We think that will come back to Transportation Committee on June 5th. Our understanding is the city has paused repaving on mobility plan corridors for now, until they get the implementation plan in place. July 1st is the first day of the new fiscal year for the city of Los Angeles. And so our hope is that they get their ducks in a row, get their stuff together, and have an implementation plan done so they can hit the ground running in the new fiscal year, which begins July 1st. We were very disappointed by the mayor's budget. I'll get to that in a minute. It is a tough budget year. But just to remind everybody, during the campaign, the city administrative officer claimed that HLA would cost over $300 million a year for 10 years to implement, and that if it passed, the city council would immediately have to find the funds by cutting other services. Well, the only HLA money in the budget at all is $102,000 for 2 GIS specialists to build the dashboard that the measure requires, the public-facing dashboard. So we went from 300 million to 102,000. For the record, that's a difference of $299,898,000. If you see repaving happening near you and you think it's on a mobility plan corridor, please let us know. You can email tips@streetsforall.org. If you're not sure, feel free to email, send us a picture, send us the street from here to here. We'll check it out. And you can also look at the mobility plan on a Google map at this link we made, bit.ly/mobilityplanmap. So it is a very tough budget year. The city of Los Angeles has a huge budget deficit, mostly of their own making. In active transportation, LADOT got cut by, the active transportation department got cut by 1 person. A little bit more money is going to active transportation for fewer people, meaning people got raises. We're not against people getting raises, that's great. But because there's no added positions, it means that mobility plan implementation, HLA implementation, is in no way going to speed up. And in fact, it's probably going to get slower. The Bureau of Street Services, which repaved streets, had 135 positions cut, and their budget was decreased by 13% from 229 million to 199 million. The Pavement Preservation Program, which is the main implementation mechanism for Measure HLA, has 60 fewer positions, from 306 to 246, and a budget that was cut from 111 million to 88 million. The net is slower repaving, and it's even worse than this because Streets LA now has to put in curb ramps anytime they repave streets, ADA compliant curb ramps, and there's no new dedicated money for that. So that's going to come out of the already decreased funding for repaving. So we're going to do really little resurfacing next year compared to normal. Bottom line, no major dedicated HLA funds, slower repaving, and frankly, no sense of urgency, despite us having a 2-decade high of pedestrian deaths. We'd love to see the city do better here and take it more seriously. I am now going to pass it over to Taranig to go over our first win or fail.
Thanks, Michael. The project I'd love to see is Santa Monica adjacent. It would connect 2 beach bike paths that are now separated by the marina at Marina del Rey. In 2018, Trevor Abramson, an avid cyclist and architect, created a rendering of a beautiful bike bridge to close this gap. Such a bridge would create a long bike highway along the beach and would just be incredibly awesome. Okay, so LA County Supervisor and LA Metro Director Holly Mitchell has asked Metro to delay the Sea Line extension decision. She stated that a hybrid option that is now under consideration, which Streets for All actually supports, is a new option, and she wishes to give the public more time to consider this new option. Unfortunately, this isn't the first delay for this extension. So we would encourage Metro and the supervisor to stop delaying this project and then move forward with the proposed hybrid option. And next slide. Some great news. Parking minimums have now been eliminated for multifamily buildings in Los Angeles County. This was in part thanks to a collective effort of numerous organizations such as Move LA, Inner City Law Center, Bike LA, League of Women Voters of Los Angeles, Active SGV, Streets for All, and others. Since on-site parking boosts construction costs and increases rents, this elimination is a welcome move in an effort for the region to transition to more sustainable, efficient, and equitable modes of mobility. Now over to Kyle.
Thanks, here, Nick. I think for my Santa Monica interest, I would love to see more e-bikes and being able to access them more. I love spending time in the area with my family on bike. but also really looking forward to seeing Lincoln, uh, pedestrianized and get bike lanes the entire stretch all the way from Santa Monica as far south as possible. That would be really cool to connect the west side. So really happy to be talking about a couple wins here. First up, Better Overland. If you've seen this, you can imagine how excited we are about this. It's a wonderful proposal to add 2.5 miles of concrete protected bike lanes and protected intersections all the way from Venice down to Slauson, where the transit hub currently exists. Right now, the project is in the community outreach and stakeholder engagement phase, closing that out and going to city council review later this month for final concept approval. You can see a snapshot of the concept here, and you can check out the full documentation on the city site. It's really nicely done. So if approved by city council later this month, May 27th specifically, the staff will submit the grant application. This is a grant project. It will submit the grant application to Caltrans, ATP, and that decision comes in June, or the submission comes in June, and the city will be notified by January. So check it out. Yep, looking forward to this one. And next up, we have the another grant opportunity, an extension to Venice Blvd For All. Obviously, if you've been following us, you know how excited we are for something like this, where we're looking at almost 4.5 miles of extending adding protected bike lanes, bus boarding islands, curb ramps to the work that we just celebrated. This would be a $20 million grant, and if approved, it would be awarded. If awarded, it would be complete by June 2028. So yeah, this would really complete the vision for Venice Boulevard, stretching all the way towards downtown, something that we mentioned here before. So super excited. All right, over to Michael for final remarks and to introduce our guest.
Thanks, Kyle. We have one upcoming event. It'll be May 22nd. It's with the LA County Bike Master Plan. It's going to be somewhere on the west side. Watch our socials or check your email from us for details on where and when. And as always, if you want to help out, subscribe to our emails, volunteer, donate, and get involved. We're at Streets for All on all the socials, and you know how to find us. Excited to preview next month. We're going to have the mayor of West Hollywood, John Erickson, and that will be Wednesday, June 12th at 5 p.m. via Zoom. So I am so excited to welcome our guest, Jesse Zwick. Jesse is a writer, a public policy communication strategist, and a new father. He grew up in Santa Monica, graduated from Harvard University, and worked as a journalist in Washington, D.C. before returning home to write for film and television. He helped found and lead SELA, a neighborhood homeless services nonprofit, which inspired him to enter local politics, serving as director of communications to LA City Council members Nithya Raman and Mike Bonin, and of course is a current council member in Santa Monica. Welcome, Jesse. We're so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Thank you. If it's all right with you, I'm going to just kick things off with our first question. We're going to go through a few questions from our steering committee and then open it up to the audience.
Sounds great.
So Jesse, you've always been a champion for the things that Streets for All advocates for and really cares about in Santa Monica. And we're always curious people's personal journeys to get there. Why do you care about things like building a walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly Santa Monica? Were you always thinking like this, or was there a moment in your life, sort of an aha moment that made you turn into sort of an urbanist? And lastly, what is your normal mode of transportation around the city?
Yeah, great. You know, I grew up, as you mentioned, in Santa Monica, and these issues, while, you know, broader, I was always sort of, I guess, an environmentalist. I wasn't particularly deeply versed in these issues. After college, well, in college in Boston, and then after college in Washington, D.C., I did have the experience for a decade of living in different cities without a car, and experiencing the ease of doing so. I I lived for 4 years in Washington, D.C., when the bike was my primary mode of transportation. So it certainly opened my eyes to what was possible coming from a city like Los Angeles, where that seemed far-fetched. And then, you know, personally, my journey into urbanism, I think starting with my work in homelessness, made me a really big advocate for better housing and land use policy in the city. So I guess I came to it through the housing side, but I've definitely come to see, obviously, denser land use and functional public transit as inextricably married concepts. And I think all housers should be transit enthusiasts and vice versa. I was living in Silver Lake for a decade, but when I moved back to Santa Monica a few years ago, I did experience, you know, personally, that I was like, oh, it's much easier and safer to get around here. There's less hills, more bike lanes, and it did encourage me to get rid of my car and buy an e-bike. That is my primary mode of transportation around Santa Monica. It's incredibly doable if you live and work here. Obviously, if you commute across the city, there's still some things we got to work on. And when it comes to Santa Monica, I think since I've, you know, started biking around the city, what you realize is, even though we have a pretty good system here, when you look at it, you know, daily from the perspective of being on a bike, you still see how far we have to come. And frankly, you also feel differently when tragedy strikes anyone on a bike, when, you know, you bike with your 2-year-old on the back of your bike every day. So it's made me much more invested over these last 2 years being a regular biker. And it's been, you know, really exciting to try to hopefully keep Santa Monica at the forefront of this work.
Thank you. Over to you, Ternick.
Hi, Jesse. Santa Monica amended its bike action plan in 2020 to add a network of protected bike lanes, among other things. The plan included a 5-year vision, but most of the plan hasn't been implemented yet due to lack of staff and funding. What do you think can be done to help the city get back on track with the bike action plan?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that I ask staff a lot as well. Santa Monica, like everywhere, obviously had a rough few years with COVID and the resulting budget crisis. It hit Santa Monica particularly hard as a sort of a city that made a lot of money through its tourism industry and stuff like that. Layoffs were really crushing, and the mobility department within transportation department as a whole saw, I think, more layoffs than any other department before I came into office, and that has, you know, been a big part of what has sort of slowed things down. I have tried to attack this, I guess, 2 ways. One is on the resources side, being, you know, how do we find ways, whether it's through local sources of funding or state and federal grants, to bring more resources to bear on that issue. And then the other side is a different question of, you know, how do we do more with less? And I think they're both equally important. So I guess starting with the second one first, you know, I've been in a lot of, we have a new director of transportation in Santa Monica, and I've been in a sort of ongoing discussion with them about sort of the various processes that we take as a city when we say we want to do something until we actually, you know, put a bollard in the ground, whether that's the, you know, design process, the community outreach, all of the different sort of ways in which we engage 9 different departments on each decision that we make as a city. And it's a thing where I think there's a way we've done things for a long time, and that's like a conversation that I'm constantly having with staff about how can we sort of streamline as much as possible to contend with the reality that, you know, we don't have the luxury of having all the money in the world like we used to, and we don't have the luxury of time when we have dangerous road conditions and people are dying. So I'm trying to work on that sort of on a cultural level and on a process level with staff. On the level of resources, you know, I fought in the last budget cycle for us to rehire a city traffic engineer. That was a position that was cut and hadn't been refilled. Which hopefully will allow us to kind of move faster and in-house on some projects without having to contract as many things out. And then, you know, I'm working currently on trying to get the city to put a measure on the ballot this upcoming November that would look at increasing a sort of little-known tax called our parking facilities tax, which, you know, it's generally 10% essentially of, you know, the cost of parking for most private operators, and most cities have one. It's in lieu of a sales tax. But there are cities like San Francisco that have a tax as high as 25%. And the back of the envelope calculation by our financial department was for every 1% that we raise this parking tax, we would generate around $1 million in annual revenues that we could hopefully devote to create a more consistent revenue stream for some of these mobility projects in Santa Monica. So the proposal is to raise it by 9 or 10%. So we'd be generating around $9 to $10 million a year. Like all tax increases in the state, it has to go on the ballot. So that's something I'm kind of working on getting on the ballot right now. And we'll hopefully, a lot of those state grants that we are relying on to do a lot of those protected bike lanes, there's algorithms that, and formulas that the state uses to determine a number of different priorities as to how they award them. And Santa Monica, outside of one particular census tract in the Pico neighborhood near the 10 freeway, doesn't often qualify as being among high need. So a lot of the other parts of the city where we want to see infrastructure improvements, we're going to have to come up with other sources of funding because it'll be pretty hard for us to be reliant just on state and federal grants. So that's my hope with this sort of parking tax increase, which of course, incidentally, might also hopefully encourage mode shift the slightest bit when it comes to people making a calculation as to, what mode of transportation they'll take when they try to go downtown or elsewhere.
All right, that's awesome to hear. I want to just ask about getting things done. Obviously, the current council majority has shown not to be in favor of safer streets, with the mayor himself even regularly mentioning not liking the new concrete protected bike lanes on 17th Street. Yet, you've been personally able to get quite a few mobility related items passed. How tough has it been to navigate this council with progressive transportation ideas? And how have you managed to push things through and maintain progress on items such as the parking facilities tax? What else are you focused on?
No, that's a really good question. I mean, I think as someone who cares, as I mentioned, a lot about housing and transportation, I do think, frankly, there's an easier political path to on certain transportation issues when it regards to pedestrian and bicycle safety. I think it's when it's framed the right way and it's put before council as to whether they want to protect kids and save lives. It's a little harder for certain people to vote no, even if their own proclivities might dispose them against some of these projects. So what am I trying to say? For lack of appearing cynical, I've also tried to capitalize on any bad thing that's happened in the city, not let any tragedy go to waste, make sure that if someone gets hurt in our city, that we're using that as an opportunity to say this has to change. And I also have to thank bike advocates both in Santa Monica and at Streets for All for showing up to meetings. In a small city council, if 10 or 20 or 100 people show up and talk about something, it can sort of if you're a politician that likes to kind of hold your finger to the wind and do whatever makes you think that people will yell at you less, it can be very effective. So I think we've won some things just by being better at mobilizing advocates, and again, just I think playing into the safety narrative and that I think which for whatever reason I think is maybe more of a political winner sometimes than get people out of their cars to save the environment narrative, which I also care about deeply. But I'd say with this council, it's the best way has been to sort of dare them to vote against protecting kids.
Thank you.
So there's an election coming up. If Santa Monica regains a progressive majority on council in November, what are some of the big ideas you have for the future of Santa Monica that perhaps right now you don't feel you can make progress on, but if the politics supported the ideas, it might be a different story?
Yeah, I think what I would also say, what I would say to that, which starts actually, I think, with the last question is another way I've managed to get things done, frankly, is by working closely with staff and trying to advance things through staff recommendations and inserting ideas into the normal workflow of pre-established plans. And what's harder is to actually sort of bend the whole sort of trajectory of where we want to go unless we have a real council majority that's focusing on that. It's been easy enough to kind of keep the ball rolling with plans that were pre-made. What's hard is to kind of take it to that next level unless you have a real majority of council members who are adamant that this is their top priority. I think for one, there is this idea that we have this bike action plan, as was mentioned, and we're way behind schedule in terms of implementing it. Obviously, you know, I love what HLA did in terms of making sure that, you know, if we're going to be doing any road work, we should be implementing that plan. We shouldn't be waiting. I think there are some like quick build options we could do potentially, you know, as we even wait for the money to do some of the more hardscape infrastructure work of protected bike lanes. Like I'd love to see us, you know, reorient the parking and the bike lanes on a bunch of streets where we've said we're going to do protected lanes, and just by restriping them and putting in some plastic bollards or something, just to make sure that we're moving quickly on that plan and doing it, you know, doing something now, even as we wait to do it permanently later. Another thing I've become really interested in is that we, as a tool, I guess, in a toolkit that we just haven't used in Santa Monica, it involves like modal filters or diverters to create like true bike boulevards that dissuade cars from driving on, you know, various residential streets. I think you guys mentioned Sharrows when you were talking about your state legislative package. You know, we have a lot of streets in Santa Monica that in that bike plan are designated bike boulevards or neighborhood greenways, but all that means right now is they have Sharrows painted on them. And, you know, for me, I would love to truly realize that vision of putting in some real traffic diverters strategically placed on certain streets so that we can really get cars off of certain neighborhood streets and make them dedicated predominantly to just, you know, a little bit of local traffic, but mainly biking and walking. I think that'd be a great way to increase open space and allow people to enjoy their neighborhoods more. Santa Monica is like a perfect grid in many respects. So I think it lends itself really well to a concept of, you know, Barcelona superblocks, where you could have, you know, certain streets that are more like arterials and others that are more devoted to biking and walking. And I'd love to be more ambitious when it comes to streets that just we don't promote, you know, we don't have people drive on at all. Beyond that, as a small thing, I'm trying to bring back the concept of speed bumps. There's a lot of interventions, you know, when it comes to the width of roads to speed bumps and diverters and other things that I think traditionally there's been a lot of pushback from our emergency services departments about how it might, you know, slow down emergency response and stuff like that. But there's a lot of innovations out there that have happened where, you know, we can lay down speed cushions that have the ability for you know, fire trucks to still go through the middle, you know, in the breaks if need be. So I'm trying to get the city reacquainted with sort of different traffic calming measures and trying to get all departments on board, frankly, with the idea that we, you know, we aren't like, there's an overblown sort of sense that these things are sacrificing safety, when in fact, I think we can easily allow them to coexist. So I'm working on that. And then beyond those things, I just, you know, again, would love to reorient some of the work that we're doing, you know, in mobility to be a little bit more around let's put this in the ground and see what happens, as opposed to let's do a traffic study for a year and do 2 years of community outreach and then consider putting something in the ground. I think we've sort of bottled ourselves up a little in process, and the only way you're going to change that, I think, is if you create directives that are more outcomes oriented and empower staff to work towards outcomes as opposed to satisfy processes and rules. And that's a kind of more heady, complicated thing that I do want to work on, just because I think that every time a project, be it a housing project on city land or a bike lane, you know, comes before council, and I see that it was first proposed 7 years ago, and you know, it really upsets me when these are such urgent problems. So I really want to, you know, encourage us to sort of try to focus more on working backwards from certain outcomes that we want to see, as opposed to saying this is the process that we have to follow.
Over to you, Kyle.
Thank you. So for the Michigan Ave Greenway, the city is currently expanding it, but data shows that it hasn't been successful in reducing the number of cars. So far, the daily vehicle count still far exceeds that of a greenway. diverters that would likely fix this issue were originally included in the plans, and a growing number of people in the community are asking for them. So what do you think it would take for the city to install more diverters and other traffic calming measures on this and other corridors?
Yeah, well, the simplest answer relates to Michael's question, which it would take a different council. But beyond that, I think it's interesting. Yeah, the original Michigan plan did have a diverter. I believe it was supposed to go at 11 and Michigan. And Michigan is a street in Santa Monica that kind of runs down the heart of the city, crisscrosses the 10. But it's also a really popular way that parents drive their kids to school at Santa Monica High School, and it becomes like a super highway parking lot thoroughfare, twice a day in a way that really, does ruin it as its intentions in many ways without having that diverter. That plan, implementation preceded me. I know it was a very, the diverter part of it was very divisive, and the previous council essentially nixed that part of it, and to me really didn't realize it as a true greenway as a result. There's a lot of complicated politics, frankly, in the Pico neighborhood. It's a traditionally majority Black and brown neighborhood that has seen a lot of government interventions that have been really harmful, most notably the development of the 10 freeway, and also the use of a lot of eminent domain that took a lot of people's homes and displaced a lot of people. So I think there's sometimes a lot of inherent mistrust and skepticism when it comes to government sort of coming into that neighborhood and making changes. And I think there are a lot of people in the community that would like to see it, and a lot of people in the community that are very concerned and suspicious about it. I think staff, particularly when I talk to them on this issue of diverters, they talk to me as if they have a bit of PTSD from that particular fight in Santa Monica. And part of my job is to be therapist and say, it's okay. Some people will yell. I really think we should focus on, making the intervention and, basically waiting 30 days and then taking a pulse, or 90 days and then taking the pulse of people on how they feel about it. Because I think so much of it is that angst about change, that thought that it will ruin your life, and that most of the time, once the change is made and you've given some time, people realize, its benefits, and they realize the downsides are maybe not as big as imagined. And so I think that's another big reason why we should try to iterate maybe with quick builds and, try things out, and then let the temperature sort of decline a bit, show people that it's not the end of the world, and maybe do things that way on a pilot basis in order to kind of move forward without talking it to death before we've actually done something. I think the other thing that I've thought of, frankly, is that when it comes to things like diverters and taking, cars off streets entirely, I think there's a way that you can channel some NIMBY energy here when it comes to like anger about cut-through traffic. And a part of me, actually wants to do it more where instead of telling the neighborhood, like, this is where it's going to go, I would like almost reshape the whole thing and make it like a contest and be like, look, you have a chance to take cars, that are cutting through your neighborhood off your street. Like, apply if you think you want to do that, and almost make it like a thing that people would be competing to get on their street, as opposed to saying, oh, we're imposing this on you in some way, and open it up to every neighborhood and see if we can actually channel some of that traditional neighborhood NIMBYism towards, removing cut through traffic in their neighborhoods.
Awesome, thank you.
With the Metro D line being extended to the VA and the mobility plan, including 24/7 bus lanes, both on Santa Monica Boulevard and Wilshire, what do you think it would take for Santa Monica to implement a bus lane on either side of these corridors, matching what City of LA and Caltrans are planning on doing? And also, do you think the D line will ever get to the ocean or connect with the E line in downtown Santa Monica?
So I know we're doing we're in the process of looking at our Big Blue bus, and strategically in terms of post-COVID and with new metro lines coming, and just by generally analyzing our usage, like saying how best we can route our buses and what frequency of service we should use and all of that. And definitely some of what's being proposed is meant to provide better bus service to what's expected to be, a terminus with lots of people getting off on a regular basis. I think we have one bus that will be going to Century City, which will be the end for a certain amount of time. And then we have another route that's going to be servicing the VA quite frequently for when that is ready. I definitely think one of the things I said to them, frankly, is they talked a lot about how, you know, there's a trade-off right now between the amount of routes they run and the frequency of service. And they've said that they've leaned into the idea of running more frequent service on less lines as a way of making the bus experience easier and more pleasant for people who are trying to use it. I said to them, that sounds great, but I would say the number one way to improve the bus experience would be to make it move faster than cars. So, you know, I definitely think dedicated lanes are the key to that. Those are obviously always a big political fight. When I mention it on Wilshire currently to BBB, they shoot back that actually the Santa Monica portion of Wilshire is not slow. It's really that bottleneck around the 405 freeway where you really get things getting, you know, buses getting snarled and traffic really slowing down. That said, I would love to work to having more dedicated lanes. You know, I think we have peak hours on Lincoln that we do it, but it's not 100% of the time. I think, you know, Wilshire and Santa Monica are definitely obviously other candidates because those are major bus lanes. Same with Pico. I think, you know, that's a big political lift and something that I would also need a more forward-thinking council on, because it would involve the loss of parking spaces. One thing that's also been proposed to me, and I don't know how Streets for All feels about this or whether anyone is trying this in the LA region, but is the idea of lanes that are kind of dynamically priced in some way, where, you know, it's a bus lane, but that in, you know, hours when traffic is light, it would be, you know, possible for cars to use it at a lower price, whereas when traffic got more expensive, it would cost increasingly more for cars that are signed up to use that lane. And it's been pitched to me on the theory that people get really angry looking at empty lanes, but that if you had a dynamically priced lane, you could, you know, actually control for keeping buses moving while making it feel better utilized. So I'm not sure, but that's another thought that I've been tinkering with a little bit when it comes to dedicated bus lanes. Oh, and when it comes to the D line itself, sorry, I just want to finish up. I would love to see it go all the way down Wilshire. It is not seemingly in the immediate plans for Metro. One thing I've heard is that Santa Monica did such a poor job building along the E line that they aren't that interested in building it into Santa Monica. I am also in talks with a guy, I don't know how Streets for All feels about this, but I am in talks with a guy who's a very big fan of aerial gondolas, who would like to run an aerial gondola from the end of the VA, from the end of the D line at the VA to Santa Monica. I was inherently skeptical of that, but I do hear that the actual infrastructure cost and the amount of people that can be moved is pretty impressive when you look at how it's used in certain South American cities. So I wouldn't rule it out entirely.
How many gondola fights are we going to have in this region at one time? Okay, our last curated question. So you and I have talked about this. The existing Expo line bike path gates that force cyclists to dismount or zigzag are only present in Santa Monica's portion of the Expo line bike path. In the last couple of years, there's been an effort to get the gates removed or modified, especially to make it easier for longer bikes, electric cargo bikes, which are becoming more popular. Any update on the conversation with the CPUC, and why do you think those are only required in Santa Monica?
You know, I actually did talk to our mobility staff recently about this, and I cannot get an answer to that final question as to why we are subject to this rule, whereas there are so many other parts of the bike path that don't have to follow it. It is in our, you know, various memorandums that we signed with CPUC, and the latest update I have is that there was a sit-down discussion on this topic. It was pointed out that there were, you know, various other places that didn't use these gates in the same way. And actually what the sad thing that came out of it was that they did a little review of the gates and found that one of them had been removed and are now making us put it back. But that said, you know, what they have said to us is that if we want to propose an alternate design that is less onerous, we can do that, and they can look at that and review it. And I believe that is something that has been added to our workflow to design an alternate set of gates. I think one of the things that was discussed at the last meeting was simply something like some bollards of sorts that are, you know, wide enough to get through, but you have to slow down to go through them, but not gates that you have to literally dismount and zigzag between. So they're definitely towing the line that we need to keep something, but they have signaled their openness to a redesign, and that's something that I think is on us now to propose to the CPUC as a different design that hopefully will satisfy their desire for safety, I guess, while perhaps not, completely ruining it as a bike riding experience.
Cool. Please make sure they're wide enough for bike trailers that might be carrying
that's
kids or
that's a
dogs.
good point. It's a good point.
Okay, in no particular order, there's a question here if you would have any interest in joining the Metro board.
Yeah, totally. There's one of our former mayors in Santa Monica, Pam O'Connor, was on the board for a very long time. She's a friend and mentor, and I think it's an amazing way to they have a lot of resources and a lot of ability to shape the region, and it would be really exciting to play a role in that, I'd say, for sure.
Looks like she's on the Zoom, so I think she just heard your answer.
Oh.
Next question, is it possible for Santa Monica to get more Metro bike share stations? August says, right now, I think they're only at this downtown Santa Monica E-Line stop.
Yeah, I think there's like one more at like 14th in Arizona or something like that. There's a lot of medical buildings around there, and I think there's one that's there. But you're right that it's generally a not very useful thing when it's a dock system and there's like only 2 places you can dock the bike. My understanding is that it's sort of a standoff between the city and the county or Metro, where I think Metro wants us to pay in more if they're going to install more, and currently we don't have the money to do that. I totally agree that if we're going to have this system, it's pretty lacking right now, and I would love to see the city and Metro kind of come to a better situation where those Metro bikes are more useful. I'm going to write it down as a thing to look into, basically, because I have heard this. And since I have my e-bike, I haven't encountered it personally as an inconvenience, but it's an issue for sure.
I think there used to be more stations when you had your own bike share program, aside from
Metro.
Metro.
Yeah, and we have a lot of like ghost sort of stations from that day.
Yeah, those could just be activated. I think you'd actually have pretty good coverage. John says, parking enforcement has been a problem. Can we get parking enforcement officers on bicycles and stiffen penalties? We'll either raise more funds or get people out of the bike lanes, and either of those seem like an improvement.
Yeah, parking enforcement, and frankly, in violation of both parking violations and moving violations in Santa Monica is pretty abysmal right now. I think probably some of you have seen similar stats from San Francisco or elsewhere, but I learned through just some open data source when it comes to moving violations. We used to pull over 40 cars a day, and now we have less, that we do like 7 or something. So there's a lot of impunity. Bike lane violations are super common. The 2 things I'm trying to do about that, in addition to encourage more enforcement, are try to frankly move it outside the domain of the traffic enforcement wing of the police department. And the 2 ways I'm looking at that are, one, trying to use cameras that can detect cars that are parking in bus and bike lanes and issue tickets automatically. I believe we're going to be piloting a program that will use cameras to take the license plates of cars that are parking in our bus and bike lanes. I think we're attaching them to buses in part, I think, is a way to do that, but maybe we can also attach them to parking enforcement vehicles. I'll have to look into the details. And the other side of it is really kind of looking at a comprehensive like curb management, because sort of study of Santa Monica. Obviously, we live in this, Uber, Amazon delivery economy, and we just don't have the amount of loading zones necessary to accommodate that. Like, I hate when people are double parked in a bike lane, but I also recognize that there's often nowhere for delivery people to park. And what we really need is to do like a really comprehensive assessment and take away a lot of parking spaces and add a lot of loading zones. And on top of that, I would say that there's a lot of cool AI sort of smart curb technology out there now too that are partnering with cities, where we could not only create more loading zones, but we could make the Amazons of the world pay by the minute for using them and issue violations again automatically to cars and others that are using them illegally. So I'm trying to get us to partner with like this company called Automotus that has done some cool smart curb work in Pittsburgh, where they actually pay for a lot of the infrastructure up front and then share the revenues they make from Amazon and other delivery companies with the city.
Totally with you on loading zones. And in fact, you might have some resistance from inside the city because those parking meters generate revenue for the city. So cities are sometimes reluctant to give them up. Next question, what can the city do to improve public safety on the E line? And would you be open to adding police at the station?
Yeah, there's some jurisdictional stuff. I mean, for the most part, our police are not in charge of monitoring safety on the E line. The Metro has its own. I mean, I guess they've just traditionally worked with the sheriff's department. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure if they're moving away from that to their own safety model or what. But our police officers, to the extent that they're involved, I guess, would be in and around the stations. I'm not sure the exact sort of where the jurisdiction begins and ends. So I would say it's not fully on Santa Monica Police Department to police the trains, but we can certainly try to make it a more safe experience around them. I want the E-line. I mean, I ride it. I don't find it, I haven't found it particularly dangerous, but I understand that there are regular and, unpleasant experiences that people have. And I want to make it an inviting experience for everyone and do what we can in that regard. I know we're working with Metro also on kind of creating more services that would sort of be there at the end of the day when it comes to people who are riding the trains with nowhere else to go. Right now, they tend to be, Santa Monica is the end of line station on the E line, and at 12 or 1 or whenever it stops running, they just kick everyone out onto the street, and there's nowhere for people to go at the end of each day. And it's not really helping Santa Monica. It's not really helping people. And I hope that instead of just sort of kicking people out into the city at the end of each day and saying good luck, we could try to use that as an opportunity to make contact with people who are struggling and offer them services and shelter at that time. So that's something I'm working on. But yeah, I'm all in favor of making public transit. I don't want anyone to not take public transportation because they feel unsafe. I want to make it safe for everyone.
Josh says, I'm a recent LMU grad with a degree in environmental science. What employers in the city are doing the most to advance sustainable public policy, both transit related and beyond?
I mean, Santa Monica is an exciting, kind of part of the knowledge economy, Silicon Beach. We have a lot of, tech companies and startups. I think what we're probably most famous for is we were sort of the birthplace of a lot of these micro mobility companies. Bird and others were based here. I think they've moved away. There was that company Coco. I think they might be in Culver City now. That also is the autonomous electric delivery robots and things like that. So those are some companies that I know we're kind of famous for. Snapchat's our largest employer. I'm not entirely sure, how active they've been in terms of their sustainability work specifically. I think I'd have to sort of do a deep dive to answer that question more fully, but I think there are a lot of interesting knowledge economy startups that are based here that are doing good work, and my hope is to nurture them and keep them in Santa Monica.
John asks, how do you feel about micromobility sharing the bike lanes? Do you see pushback for the use of stand-up scooters, e-bikes, e-scooters, and other mobility devices in bike lanes? And is it better to transition the term micromobility lanes to be more inclusive of vehicles that bring in many more non-car riders into the bike parlance?
A good question. I mean, I know that as a slight aside to that, I think for a long time our bike lanes our beach path technically doesn't allow e-bikes, and I think that should change. I think in general we need to allow e-bikes first of all.
Is that enforced?
I don't think so, but there is a big issue with pedicab operators not being allowed to have motors on the beach. I think, I mean, I'm for all modes of transit. I have read that the scooters and things are a little more dangerous. So I guess that's something to consider, you know, just in terms of personal safety of people riding. Um, I know that our mayor, who was mentioned prior, claims to like bike share but hates scooters. I think part of that has to do with just people not liking them being left on the sidewalk or strewn about or something like that. I think that they should be allowed to go in the bike lanes. I haven't actually considered this very much or thought too much about it, but I don't see why they shouldn't be, as long as, you know, people are safely able to share traffic and go at roughly the same speed.
Marius asks, is there a plan to put bollards in daylighting zones? Seems like a potential low-hanging fruit for street safety.
Yeah, you know, that's actually an item that I put forward, specifically following a really terrible incident that occurred in one of our residential neighborhoods, where a woman was going through a two-way intersection with stop signs on two sides, and was killed by a driver going fairly quickly down the other way. And one of the things you do notice in a lot of these areas is we have red zones that are, you know, I think pretty faithfully painted on our curbs on the corners in order to daylight those intersections, but we very regularly see people, delivery trucks, mail trucks, regular people parking in them and really obstructing those sight lines in a way that does make them much more dangerous. I've seen the work of, you know, I think is it Hoboken or other cities that have really, you know, by removing a lot of street parking, have really helped minimize accidents. And I put forward a program where the city is designing a capital plan to look at whether it's bollards or planters or micromobility stations, you know, physical infrastructure to sit in those zones so that people can't just disregard a red zone and park there. I think it's really important that we always be designing infrastructure that is foolproof and not reliant on people either following the law or us enforcing it in every instance. So I've asked for them to design a capital program to do low-cost infrastructure in those daylighting zones to actually keep them clear. As I mentioned earlier, the city is in a pretty bad fiscal situation due to some terrible litigation and liability issues that we face. So it is currently one of many unfunded capital projects that are, I'm gonna fight to get funded as soon as humanly possible. But I think as it stands right now, it's an unfunded project that I'm, you know, hopefully gonna find the funding for through this tax measure or otherwise.
We've got about 4 minutes left. Let's see how many questions we can get through. Dustin says, I used the circuit service this weekend to help show my parents around town. They aren't able to walk or bike around town the way I typically do, so it was a really great way to hop around downtown. Any background on how that service came to exist and how well it's met the intent, or any plans to expand it?
Yeah, Circuit is really cool. It's not really the work of the city. It's a startup actually, and I can't remember if they're Santa Monica based based on that other question, but you know, they're a partnership, I think, with some of the hotels. They do advertising. They're these great little electric vehicles that you can call and they'll take you around. I think they currently service just the Ocean Park and the downtown Santa Monica area, and they're predominantly, I think, for people who perhaps are staying here as tourists in the hotels, but anyone can download the app and use it, and it's really great. There has been ongoing discussion about saying, well, how do we expand this to the entire city, and how do we make this a really cool first or last mile solution in Santa Monica? The pushback we've gotten so far is that the Circuit vehicles are not ADA compliant, and they don't seem to have a lot of interest in getting bogged down in that. We've talked to them about some sort of public-private partnership, and when Santa Monica City gets involved, that would be, I think, a legal issue that we'd have to work through. So that's been the sticking point so far at trying to kind of expand the service. But I'm really happy that they exist, and you know, if there's any way that we can encourage them to expand further, I would be all for it.
I think this is going to be our final question, given the time. What local transportation problem or solution do you hear most from constituents? And if you could fast track one transportation project in Santa Monica, what would that be?
I mean, I think the thing let me think. What problem? I mean, the thing I probably hear most about, frankly, is the parking in the bike lanes. It's pretty rampant, and it is a real danger to people who are trying to use them, including me. And you know, we have this nice green paint, which is cute and friendly, and probably better than not, but it's no substitute for you know, hard infrastructure. And to that point, you know, we have this amazing bike plan that's pretty ambitious, and it's taking too long and it's costing too much. And if I could snap my fingers, I would, you know, put forward either the resources or the ingenuity to just effectuate that plan twice as fast as we're currently moving, because a real network of protected lanes would really, I think, be a game changer for getting a lot more people out of their cars and feeling safe biking around the city.
Jesse, we have about 60 seconds left. Anything you would like to say to the audience or add?
No, just that I think maybe just, you know, from afar, you know, I watched the HLA campaign. I was invested in it, you know, just as an enthusiast of this kind of work and transportation, you know, transportation safety infrastructure and everything else. And I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And I was just so impressed both by the campaign and the result. It was really remarkable. And, you know, I think you guys are doing some of the most inspiring and effective advocacy out there. And I just welcome you all to enjoy Santa Monica and also, you know, advocate here as much as you're able, because it helps. Well, thank you. We're likewise very inspired by Santa Monica. I think it was just voted the 8th best biking city in the country. Your 3rd Street Promenade generates close to 1/5 of your sales tax revenue. Like there's bus lanes. It's really a inspiring place, and we hope it rubs off on the city of Los Angeles, and especially Councilmember Park and CD11, which of course surrounds Santa Monica. I think a lot of people move here for that reason, and that's a constituency that can really be mobilized when it comes to making these improvements, because I think it's a real selling point for our city. Absolutely. Well, Jesse, keep up the great work. Again, you're inspiring others in Los Angeles, and we thank you for that. And thank you so much for your time. And good night, everybody. Thanks for having me. Good night.